Console-based applications. So console-based applications are these old school textual interface looking programs, right? And just to give you an idea, if we head down to the start button, type in command cmd, here we go. We get the Windows command shell, which is just a console-based application. You can see this is our textual interface, but we still can do a lot of the things that our fancy Windows user interface can do as far as the operating system and the file system go. So why do we still have these old style interfaces around, and why can we still create them in Visual Studio 2010? Well, I'll give you a couple of reasons. The first one is for training purposes and for educational purposes and even just for testing code. In fact, if you've been following on in this series, then you're probably already familiar with how to do the basics, right? We can create a simple console application, output data to the window here, and then whatever the user types in when they hit enter, we can read that data, store it in a variable, and do something. So that's one thing, and it's a lot easier just to whip up a command line or a console-based application, write some code, output it to the window, rather than create this big fancy GUI, wire up controls to the data, and all that stuff. Write your event handler code. So it's much easier to and very quick to do this kind of stuff through a console-based application. Another big reason in the real world is that a lot of companies that have applications that are scriptable. We want to give administrators and people that have to support our application a way to automate certain areas of our application. It's easy to whip up a console application, put some flags in it, and just to give you an example, if I type in ping and hit enter, here's a little application that has lots of different flags that we can use in a variety of ways with a variety of different combinations to get different results and make things happen. So a lot of big companies, including Microsoft, who has command line applications all over the place in Visual Studio, SQL Server. If you're familiar with their database platform, you can pretty much do everything you can do in SQL Server as a graphical user interface, you can do through their command line interface. The only difference here is that we can create batch files that script out these programs. So definitely one of the bigger things to create these for. And we're going to do the same thing, actually. We built in a previous nugget, in our Windows application nugget, we took a look at how to build a reminder application. Well, let's see how we would take that GUI front end and convert it to a console-based application. We're actually going to do it through a command line application. And this would be considered a command line application because we type in the program, we pass in commands, then it's going to be our responsibility to parse these commands out, figure out the combination that they passed in, and then perform the actions that our application supports based on that list of commands. So because we have done a lot of this stuff throughout this nugget, a lot of the basic stuff, I'm going to skip over the simple things like outputting data to a window using console.writeLine and reading data back into a variable using readline. That stuff we're just going to do inside of this nugget inherently because we've already done it enough that you're probably sick of seeing it. So let's close out of the window here and just head over to the outline. Very simple. We're going to have a little fun with this video and this nugget as well here. We're going to start with just building command line console applications. I'm going to show you how to accept the arguments, parse them out, and then create a reminder based on that. All right, and I'll show you some simple things that we can do here working with console-based applications that are specific to console-based applications. Just simple things you can do at the window, nothing crazy. But the big thing here is to get familiar with how to parse the arguments that get passed into the command line. And we're going to use a lot of things we've learned up to this point. We'll use things like loops. We'll use the switch statement here to make decisions off of them. And then I'll show you some string parsing things you can do as well here. All right, so let's jump over to Nugget Lab and take a look at how we can build command line console-based applications. So I'm going to jump over to Nugget Lab, and once we're over here, it's going to prepare our desktop, and we're going to hit the Start button, head up to Visual C# 2010 Express, and as soon as this fires up, we're going to create a new project. And you've seen me do this before, nothing crazy here. We're just going to hit Console Application, and let's just give this the name 18-Console App Development. We'll hit OK. And that'll give us our project here. And here's what we're talking about right here. You can see with the console application, we have this argument parameter that is a string array. So anytime this application fires up, if there are no command line flags or switches, like I just did initially here, if we go to start, type in CMD, I just typed in ping. So technically what would happen is if we set a breakpoint right here and we analyze this variable, it would be empty at this point. But if we did a ping localhost, then it would ping our local dev nugget host here, and what would have got passed into arguments is the word localhost. And if we did this /t, which just pretty much goes until we tell it to stop here by doing a Control-C, we can hit enter. And this would have been this would have had two string arrays in it, or two string variables inside of the array, I should say. One would have been localhost, and one would have been a /t. So really what it comes down to is creating your own string parsing routines that parse this out using switch statements and loops to figure out what the user typed in, set some variables, and perform some actions based on that. So that's what we're going to do, and we better stop this before it runs infinitely. There we go, Control-C. And now the only setup we really need to do here is to add our reminder class in here so we can work with it. So I'm just going to right click on our project, hit add, existing item, and I plan it inside of the C drive here, our reminder.cs. So here's our reminder class, and when we pop this open, I'm just going to copy the namespace here so we can work in the same namespace, and now we can utilize this reminder object or class within our program. Alright, so we're all set up. Now it's just the time to kind of work with this arguments variable here and see how we can accept command line parameters, parse them out. Now the first thing I want to do though is just do something like ping does here, and that is if we just type in ping with no command line parameters, then we're just going to output the help, right? Give them an idea of all the switches that this command line application supports. And we can do that just by analyzing our arg string array here and just checking the length. So if we do an if args.length less than 1, meaning they didn't pass in any arguments, then let's just output some help. And I'm just going to paste some code to the command window here from the clipboard, where we just output this help, and we have everything that we're going to support here. All right, and we'll also add the dash question mark switch in here too, so it'll also display this. But that's it, and then we can just do a console.readline here. Actually, we'll put this at the very bottom anyway, so we'll just leave that like it is. Now, if they do pass in arguments, let's add an else down here. And here we're just going to add, let's just output console.writeLine, and let's just do how many command line arguments got passed in. Just something here for testing purposes so you can kind of see here. So let's just say command line args is going to equal args.length. So this will give you a good idea here of how this stuff works. So that's very simple, but this is now going to act like ping does. If we just type in ping without any commands, it's just going to show us the help, just like this does. So we're kind of modeling after what's in Windows, and that's always a good thing. Standards always make people happy. But let me show you one thing you can do here to test this stuff, to test command line applications. Because right now, if we just run this, and let me get this console.readline down here so it'll stay open for us. Console. There we go. Readline. There we go. Now that'll keep it open for us. But now if we just hit run, it's just going to display out to the window here, help. So here's all the switches that our application, our command line here is going to support. So you can see we're going to pass in a dash add with the name, and then I'll add the reminder with the specified name, do, and then pass in a time. So here's the command and here's the data essentially. So it's pretty much what you'll see here, consistent a lot with most command line applications, is the command followed by the data if it has data attached to it. For instance, here enable is not going to have any data. We're just going to have an enable flag that's going to enable the reminder. All right. But the other thing I wanted to show you is where we're going to pass these command lines into. And to do that here, if we go to Project Properties, Project and the name of your project, Properties, and go to the Debug section, here are the command line arguments. So now we can just start typing stuff in. So add, we'll call this my reminder. And then how about dash do? How about we'll just do 10, 12 p.m. So that looks good, something like that. We'll add the seconds in there too. Why not? Slash time. I think it was alert actually. See, I don't remember what we did already. 15, meaning 15 minutes before then. And just look at the program here. So we do add do alert and then enable. So add do alert, and we can add the enable flag. All right. So this is a great way to test it out because you just type in all your command lines, their values, save it, and now when we hit run, command line args 7. And the reason that is 7 is because what happens here is space really is going to determine how many arguments you have. So every space, it adds its own element inside of the array. And you can see this just by setting a breakpoint. So let's set a breakpoint there, hit run. It's going to stop right here. Now if we hold our mouse over args, there they all are. So we got a dash add followed by the data, dash do followed by the data, dash alert data, and then enable doesn't have any data, so that's just going to be our command in that case. So you can also see that down here inside of our locals window. Here are all of the strings, all the commands that got passed in. So you can see what I mean by it's really just going to be a matter of us coming up with a routine to parse all this information out. And we're going to do that through a loop and a switch statement. So our loop is going to loop through every one of these elements, and then our switch statement is going to look for our switches, our slashes, and then the name. So we're going to look for these in a static manner, meaning we're going to just do a straight match on them. And if we find one, then we're just going to jump ahead in the loop to extract the data from it. All right, so really simple. But you know what? I do want to mention that there are entire libraries and entire components out there that third parties develop that will do all this stuff for you and make it very easy to develop command line applications, because this is definitely the manual way to do it, to write your own loops and stuff. But you know what, for simple command line applications, this is the way to do it, because then you don't have to worry about learning another library or buying a component or a third-party controller or such to do this kind of stuff with. And it's good practice too to kind of get familiar with and get comfortable with writing loops and switch statements and string parsing and all that good stuff. So let's get some code going down here that does just this. That we're going to parse this out and make our command line application here function like it would if it were the real world and we were really developing a reminder application that we could script out and pass commands to and such and create these things on the fly. So what we're going to do first is we need a reminder object to work with while we're inside of our loop and our switch statement. So here's our reminder. Let's just call this rem equals a new reminder, like so. And now we need to create our loop first. Our loop is going to be the outer thing because we're going to loop through each one of these strings inside of this array, our argument array here, to put a switch statement on and analyze it. So let's just do a for int I equals 0, I is less than args.length I plus plus. So there's our setup. There's our skeleton for our loop here. And now the next thing we're going to do, and really the only thing there is to do, is start parsing out and looking for these things inside of our argument array here. So what I'm going to do is just simply do a switch statement, and what we're going to switch on is args I, which is going to be the index here. Something just like that. So now we just need to start looking for commands. So we can just create our cases here. Let's just do a case add and everything that we support. So if we scroll up here a little bit, we're going to do a do. We're going to do an alert. And we're going to do an enable. And finally here we're also going to do a little help switch here with the question mark. Alright, so now we really just need to write code to what this does, each one of these. And then we also need to put our break on the bottom of it. So let's just write these individually here. So if we were to do an add here, what we're going to do is an rem to set a reminder. Name is going to equal args I plus 1. Because we want to grab the data comes after the add, and if this switch statement hits this dash add, that means we're on this specific element in the array. So we just want to do a plus 1 on it, and then follow that by a break. That's it. That's all we need to do. So now we just need to do this for each one of these down here. So let's do a rem.do equals args I plus 1. Now the difference here is this is going to be a date time, so we need to convert this data from a string to a date time. And that's not a problem. We can use the convert class to a date time, pass it in, and there we go. Now our alert here, if we do an rem.alert time, this is going to equal args, same thing here, I plus 1. And this is also going to cause a little problem because, once again, string data over here, integer data over here, because this is the alert time, the minutes before our due date here. So we just need to convert this Oop, to an integer. So we'll just do an int 16 there. Looks good, followed by a break. And then finally here, enable. This is a simple one. We're not looking for any data here. It's just a command itself. We don't need to do the argxi plus 1 here. So let's just do an rem that is enabled equals true. All right, and then we'll break that. And finally here, our question mark. I'm just going to paste in our code here. Oh, actually, you know what? I got to copy it first, don't I? So let's copy up our help code. Copy that a few times, head down here, and we're just going to paste this in here, which for some reason it doesn't want to paste for me. So one more try here. Right click, right click, choose copy. Alright. Head on down here, right click, choose paste. Alright, that worked that time. So we've got our help command in here. And we also need a break down here. And that's it. That's all there is to it. Now, the last thing I want to do here is just output our reminder to the window to let the user know that it was created. So let's just do a right line here. And in here, let's just do our first one. This is going to be a reminder name right here. So it's going to say name of the reminder, created for, and then this will be our due date right here with an alert. And this will be the actual time that we're alerting minutes prior. All right. So it'll say reminder name created for the date with an alert and then the time minutes prior. So we do for our first parameter there, it's going to be the name of the alert. So we'll just do an rem.name. And because we want to make sure they see that this is the reminder here, let's just send this to upper. So it'll be all uppercase. All right, and we'll do an rem.dueDate followed by an rem.alertTime. And that should do it. And just to double check, if we go to Project Properties into the Debug tab, here is all of our command line data that'll come through all of our arguments, all right? Command line arguments. And then just keep in mind here, if and users should know this is pretty standard Windows stuff here, that you need to enclose these in quotes if you have a space inside of an argument. That way it'll treat it as one argument. If we didn't have that, it'll treat this, because of the space, as two arguments, and that would cause all kinds of chaos within our application. All right, so let's save this, close out of our project properties, hit run, and for some reason here, something happened, something went wrong. What went wrong? Index 0 must be greater than or equal to 0 and less than the size. Oh, you know why? Look at this. See this 3 here? That should be 2. Programming. It'll drive you nuts. It'll make you lose all your hair like me. So let's try that again. Save it, hit run, and there we go. Command line argument 7. My reminder created for today's date, 10/12/10 p.m. with an alert 15 minutes prior. Pretty cool. So that's it. Really easy to create command line applications. It's just a matter of figuring out how you're going to parse this arguments, how you're going to deal with your arguments. And again, everybody does this stuff differently. I've had great success doing this way because it's straightforward. There were a couple of instances where we've had huge applications that had a lot of different stuff and a lot of different combinations. And in that case, I will admit it was a lot easier getting a third-party component that you just pass your arguments to, and it makes it all nice and turns it into a class like our reminder class, and then we just access them through properties rather than all this static string stuff. But for simple things, and for learning things, it's awesome doing it this way. So I can definitely advise you, now that you know how to do it, going this route. Now, just a couple of little things I want to show you here, since we're in the world of the console. Some things that are specific to the console object here. Number one, we can beep at our users, and that's always fun to do. So, and you know what? This will actually be a good situation for it, because right now, if we were to run this without any arguments, we would fail because our reminder object would not get set, and we get one of those object instance not equal to an instance of an object errors, which you'll get very familiar with over time as a programmer with, I promise you. So let's do this. Let's beep at our users here by writing a try catch. So we're going to write a try around all of our main code here. So we'll do a try there. It'll end right about here. And what we're going to do is then catch an exception. We'll call it EX. And we're just going to write some code down here that will write out to the window the error message. So we'll do a write line EX.toString and follow it up with the console.beep. Alright, that's always fun to do. Gotta love beeping at the users, right? So now if we just make sure in project properties, we've cleared out our command line arguments, which I've done. I'm going to save this, hit run, and you didn't hear it, but it beeped. It beeped in my ear. So that's it. Pretty straightforward and simple to do console.beep. And now all of our errors, rather than crashing the application, go out to the window. And there it is, object reference not set to an instance of an object. How do we fix that? Well, we just put an if statement right here. We just say if args.length greater than 0, run that code below it. That's it. So now we won't get that problem anymore. See, that is just display help, no more problems. And that's because we put a check there to make sure that the length of the command lines was greater than 0. So that's beeping. A couple just little things here I won't show you how to do. I'll just show you by going to the properties here to console dot. You can control the background color of the command window, the height, the width. You can control caps locks, num locks, where the cursor is, the foreground color. If certain keys are available, there's the num lock that I was talking about. And these are pretty popular here. The standard error output, standard input, and standard output. These will give you streams. If an error occurs, you can actually trap the data. And these are good for people, if you're going to script something or automate something out, and if an error occurs, you can log this error, that was in the console. Because you may not know, it may all, happen, 2 in the morning when the job kicks off to run it, and you want to trap all that error information so you can see it in a log somewhere. This is how you would do that here, is open the standard error output and pipe that into a log file somewhere. And the input is what goes in, and the output is what comes out, including errors. All right, so that's pretty much all there is there. We're used to read key, read line. Same with write key, write line, all that good stuff. And then the rest here, here's a title. We can set a title somewhere. This is kind of neat. We can do title equals reminder created. And we can pop this down here after our if statement. If it truly was created, we can set the title of the window. So now if we go into our project properties one more time, paste in those command line arguments, hit save, and we run it. Here we go, reminder created. So you have full control over the window here, and pretty much all the properties that you can set inside of here, we have control over. So everything from the cursor size to the buffer to the font, the layout, the colors, you can set all of this stuff programmatically through the console object. All right, and that's that. So in this CBT Nugget, we took a look at console-based applications. We started off with just a brief look at what they're useful for. We saw they're great for educational purposes, for testing out code, just writing up code and outputting it to the window to see what happens there. And we also saw one of the big uses for it in the real world is creating, a different kind of a window into your application, one that administrators, developers, and other people who need to access functionality without a user interface can do, and not only do through this, but also script out in batch files. And then we saw here how to build a command line application and how to take those arguments that get passed in, parse them out, and perform actions based on them. I hope this has been informative for you, and I thank you for viewing.